So let us continue with our analysis of the Queen's Gambit, the opening we have been analyzing for the last couple of weeks. In our previous episodes we have seen what happens after Black's knight to c6 and e5 in this position, so today we will continue with Black's third possible option, knight to f6.
In difference to our previously analyzed move, this attacks the e4 pawn, while the other two moves attack the d pawn, meaning that the game will develop in another way than the previously two analyzed variations.
White can here mainly choose between two variations. Either White advances with the pawn or White tries to defend it. The advancing part is quite easy since it's only one option, namely e5, and this is actually the recommended line as well.
To try to defend the pawn is another matter though. There are many possible ways of protecting the pawn, and White can use the f-pawn by playing f3, the queen by placing it on c2, e2 and f3, and of course by using the knight by placing it on c3.
None of these other moves work very well though, since f3 opens up the white position too much and loses a development tempo. The queen move all leads to loss of the d4 pawn, and knight to c3 isn't that good either.
Because in this position Black is to play e5, which leads to a slight advantage for Black after d takes on e5, a queen exchange on d1 and knight takes on e4. White should keep the fourth move e5 though. The Black knight is threatened and has several options to retreat to. The only good option is knight to d5, since the other moves are either too passive or they place the knight on a very exposed square.
Knight to e4, for example, leads to terrible consequences for Black after White's f3. Black should here play knight to d5, and this is followed by White capturing the pawn on c4, recovering the lost pawn.
White has now equaled out the material and has a space advantage, but Black is not without compensation. This because of the many weak points in the White position, which the Black knights are perfect to exploit. Black should now play knight to b6, forcing White to retreat either to b3 or d3 with his bishop. To retreat to d3 might seem better since it gives White a very nice diagonal. The problem is though that it weakens the defense of the d4 pawn.
Black has to be careful though not to capture directly on d4 after bishop to d3, since that will be followed up by White's bishop to b5 check, leading to White winning the Black queen. After bishop to b5, Black continues the game by playing knight to c6, and after this White plays bishop to e3 in order to protect the now threatened d4 pawn.
A fun thing to know is that there actually is a quite popular draw continuation in this position after White's knight to f3 instead of bishop to e3. Black takes the opportunity to pin the knight by playing bishop to g4, and now White sacrifices his queen by playing knight to g5.
Because if Black now takes the queen, White can draw after bishop takes on f7 check, followed by king to d7, bishop to e6 check, king to e8, bishop to f7 check, and so on, and there will be a draw by threefold repetition.
So after bishop to e3, Black has to develop, and does so by bishop to f5, which is followed by knight to c3, e6, and knight to g to e2.
The position is quite complicated. White has more space, but also a lot of holes in his position, giving Black opportunities. Black might have a tough time though to decide where to castle. A queenside castle can seem weak because of the open sea line, but is sometimes recommended. It all depends on White's response. Because White can very easily start an attack on the kingside as well by pushing forward his kingside pawns. But with that, we end this week's episode of the Opening School. We will of course be back again next week, so see you then.